Whoops. Well, there you go, Charles. So I had the transition set wrong, but that's okay. We're here. You're closing in. Everything is great. It feels like I haven't seen you since last year.
It's been a while, yeah. It's been ages.
You know, welcome to 2019.
Pleasure to be here with you.
Happy New Year.
And many happy returns for what will be a great year.
And now, Charles, this is a rare occasion where we're using a TV show instead of a movie.
That's right. But this is like the perpetual TV show. It's real life
That's right.
jobs.
That's true.
And again, the art department has outdone itself. I like the idea that Bill only works for a circular cash operation.
Exactly.
Cash goes one way into his pocket. But he's selfless. He's selfless. You know?
Right.
Life of public service.
Yes, he's doing more good than bad, according to someone. But this is the actual hat that Mike Rowe wears in this ad, but it said something else, cash something, and I just got rid of that.
The art department did.
Yes, it's just cash only. So, you know, and it's unmarked bills, non-traceable,
exactly,
etc.
That's how they roll.
Now, Charles, tomorrow is a pretty important day. We've got our friend Dr. Corsi and our friend Larry Klayman in court to begin this case against Robert Mueller's special counsel office. Dr. Corsi has the unique distinction of being the first subject of this investigation to actually stand up and question the viability of the prosecutors.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I ran into him yesterday. He's a member of a club, and I have a friend who's a member of the same club, and we just I didn't even know Jerry was going to be there. I assumed he wouldn't be there, given that he might be preparing. But there he was with his family, and I made a special point to go over and say hi to him, both at the beginning of the meal and after the meal. And he's not looking, particularly. He's clearly facing pressure,
right?
And he is a gentleman, I guess 71 or 72 years old. I hope that he prevails, and I have to say, I think you got to admire him for doing what he's doing.
Absolutely. I think that's, one of the most important factors. I've been saying that since the beginning. Even if people politically disagree with Dr. Corsi, unless you are for a tyrannical FBI that can just, arbitrarily level charges on whoever they want and put all kinds of pressure on them. Some kind of thing happening there. Unless you're for the FBI being this draconian body that can just do whatever they want to anybody, you got to get behind Dr. Corsi, and you raise an excellent point. He's been under pressure for months already. Financial pressure, the threat of jail, just the psychological and physiological impact of knowing that you've got the special counsel's office and the weight of the Department of Justice coming against you is a big, huge deal that hopefully Dr. Corsi can prevail, as you said. I think I've got a bad microphone in the mix here, so hopefully that won't be a problem for us, Charles. But perhaps we should get right into the slides.
Sure. If we go to the first one.
Yes.
I think it's clear this is our 132nd show. Most of them have, I'd say, overwhelming percentage have dealt with charity fraud, specifically the Clinton Foundation, the various contours of it. And it's not like the various government authorities at state level, federal level, foreign countries can say they don't know that there are problems with the Clinton Foundation. It's not as if the Clinton Foundation, after any one of these shows, has come and sent a letter to me or to you or to somebody saying, hey, we're not a fraud. We're a fine, upstanding, we do more good than harm, and we can prove it, and we want to sit down with you and take you through why you're wrong. We've got nothing like that back from any part of the Clinton Foundation, any donor to the Clinton Foundation, any part of the professional team, be it the accountants, the various law firms, the world-famous academics and institutions that take the major risk of sullying their own names and even drawing themselves into the largest criminal conspiracy ever attempted by anybody in the world.
No Tiger emails coming your way?
No Tiger emails, none of that. Yeah, exactly. Truman has a special, laptop. It's a very big keys,
Yeah,
big balls.
it's not too many fingers.
But so it's obvious, I think, to our audience. It's obvious to the many people we speak to. Yet the freaking IRS, the Justice Department, are just, it's like not our job, man. We're not going to do anything about it. Mm-hmm. And at a certain point in time, I'm sure Donald Trump has resorted to this. I know I have in a smaller setting. At a certain point in time, when there's no progress and there should be progress, you just got to go and get people into a room and start yelling and screaming at and firing people, and just like you've got to lose it. And I think this is the stage we're at now. I mean, it's not like the United States government, as we're going to show, is flush with cash. We're printing Benjamins with nothing behind them. And we run up this gigantic debt. It's over 20 trillion when you count federal and state. And we're losing money every year. We're spending more money than we take in by way of tax revenues. And here's an opportunity to stand up and do something about it, to go after the collection of rogues who is trying to get multiple countries, including our own, to sign up, to reject national government and sign up for this corrupt globalist government that the Clintons and Obamas and Bushes and other people will profit from ad infinitum. And Donald Trump's in a position. It's not like you can say, well, I'm only the president of the United States, so I've got no power. I mean, he's got power. He's got a lot of power. And I think we're at a place now where the IRS and the Justice Department, specifically Rat Rodenstein and others, have been delaying the day of reckoning for as long as they possibly can. And it's now up for we the people to hold members of the IRS and the Justice Department, senators and reps and governors and whatever, to account and say, listen, you're going to be coming to us at some point during 2019 and say, we got a massive problem. Interest rates may go up. Maybe the tax revenue is not enough. Maybe there's a debt crisis. You're going to be asking the people to cinch their belts and send more money into various taxing authorities, whether federal or state or whatever. Yet you're not doing your job. I mean, you've got obvious, massive criminality here, and you refuse to prosecute it. So, and Bill is not superhuman. There wasn't a deal that Bill left Arkansas and God came down and said, because you were living in Arkansas, which perhaps is nice in parts of it, we're going to give you a get-out-of-jail-free card for your life.
No matter what. G.H.W. Bush who said that.
Yeah. But so I think the concrete steps that Donald Trump could take immediately. There is no more important national security than the U.S. national security. And while the English may have concerns and the Israelis are rumored to have concerns about what consequences might befall their governments, their people, if we declassify the FISA warrant request, enough of all that. England is going through Brexit. It's going to be a bumpy road for them through March and afterwards. Israel has an election to contend with. Let them do that. These are great countries and strong allies, but they're very small compared to the U.S. And Donald Trump runs the risk here of letting this deep state Cosa Nostra here find ways in league with the House and league with the New York State powers that be and the California powers that be to do Trump in legally and put enough pressure on him that maybe he might resign. So
you mentioned curbing something, Charles. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie American History X, but Donald Trump could perhaps use curbing on some of the people that need it. As we put somebody's teeth on the curb and step on their head.
But I think the glue, or the cement that holds the swamp together, is this idea of unregulated globalism. That if you could say to everybody, look, you don't understand, Jason, and the audience, you don't understand. There's a higher set of concerns. I mean, first of all, if you're a man, you got to stop shaving. Okay?
What?
Because that's just...
Be scruffy?
Yeah, you got to be a scruffy, and then you got to buy these Peruvian wool hats that you put on top of your head and, wear some ridiculous set of clothes and follow... And by the way, give me all your wealth because you don't want your wealth.
And it's sausage McMuffin, not egg McMuffin.
No egg McMuffin.
No egg McMuffin.
No. And, do all that stuff. No, that's not what we signed up for. It's not working. You can't point to any place in the world where this globalist crap is working. And it's not a racist movement to say that, you want your government to focus on your own diverse nation. No, there's no nation on earth that's more diverse than this nation. And I think What people who care about their safety and property and sanity in this country want to see is if we're going to spend $6 trillion a year on government, it ought to actually freaking work. You know, we ought to have borders that are secure. We ought to be able to get the big jobs done. It's not like we're trying to get by with only $500 billion. We're spending $500 billion a month.
That's
you know, we ought to get something for that. I mean, if you think about it, the military budget that Trump got, that he's bragging about, is $712 billion per year. That's the cost, in theory, of our national defense. Yet we spend $500 billion all in, more than that actually, on federal and state and local government combined. You know, why would we need to do that? I mean, if you truly
where is it going?
It's going up in smoke, a lot of it. It's going to graft. It's going to hire people, you know, no-show jobs. It's going to some transfer payments for Social Security and food stamps and things like that. It's going for salaries and pensions and procurement. But it's got to a point where, you know, surely there's no other economy in the world except possibly China, and who knows what China's real numbers are. Right? The numbers they print suggest that their economy is bigger than $6 trillion. But that's the only other single country in the world that has an economy bigger than $6 trillion right now. And yet we spend that amount. You know, 199 other countries don't have national output equal to what we spend on government. And somehow the nitwits in Washington, D.C. and these state capitals try to argue with a straight face that we ought to spend more money. And one way to get to the bottom, to expose the lies and the corruption, to figure out what was really going on with that insurance policy, is for President Trump to do what he can do with a stroke of a pen: declassify the FISA warrant request archive, and then shine a spotlight on this Clinton Foundation and on the very people who have supposedly been investigating the Clinton Foundation since January of 2016. What in the hell are you doing here? You're allowing these crooked entities and fake entities to solicit all over the world. You're allowing them to file fraudulent financial statements that are not remotely compliant with the applicable rules, and you're just letting time pass.
He's got a higher loyalty.
Exactly, to the Comey pocketbook.
You know, along the lines of letting time pass, Charles, I am becoming concerned that a lot of the people who watch our show and who are also waiting for Donald Trump to drain the swamp, what the hell is he waiting for?
I don't know, but he better start moving. So maybe we should go to the next slide and just remind the new viewers, and I notice once again every several days you seem to get more and more viewers.
Yeah.
You were last time 77.5 and now you're 77.8.
I think it's something like that, 77,800. And also, you know, Charles, Crowdsource the Truth 2 is growing nicely as well. I do want to thank people who are viewing the show on Crowdsource the Truth 2. That's a backup YouTube channel that people can subscribe to in case there's any shenanigans that go on with the main YouTube channel. The other thing that's interesting about Crowdsource the Truth 2 is that although Crowdsource the Truth is entirely community sponsored, viewer sponsored through sponsorship payments at paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. People can also use the super chat function on Crowdsource the Truth too. So a lot of people have a lot of different reasons why they like to use one thing or the other to sponsor the show. But it really is important that people become sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth. I can't continue to do this work without the sponsorship of the audience, and Patreon has come under well-deserved fire for their complete destruction of the First Amendment. And it's really sad that so many people have adopted this strategy or this belief that because a company is a private company, they can trample people's First Amendment rights. I don't really think that's exactly the way it's supposed to work, particularly as these companies grow to such large sizes, things like Twitter and YouTube that have essentially become public utilities. We're entering into an area here where the technology is well ahead of the law, and there's plenty of times in history where that has happened. The Constitution certainly doesn't speak about how police should behave towards people in a traffic stop, because the car was never invented, but there's a whole lot of law that's come up around motor vehicles and insurance and how police interact with drivers and motor vehicles. So I think it's time for some new legislation. They should take some of that $500 billion and put it towards figuring out what people should and should not do as far as owning gigantic internet behemoths.
Yeah, per month, $500 billion per month.
Exactly. We've got some cash there.
Yeah. So what we like to do here for the new viewers in particular is we're trying to engage you in a process of looking at the sources, looking at the facts, judging for yourself whether what we're saying is accurate. And then if you decide that we are in fact speaking truth, you have an opportunity by reaching out to the people you know and the people who trust you to share this information with them. And that's why I think the viewership is growing, that's why the interest is growing, and in the end, that's how we're going to topple this crooked stuff. If the people in Washington, D.C. are so captured that they can't do it alone, they're going to need a large nudge from us, sending these various shows, the ones that you particularly like, around to your friends, sending them to the people who could investigate this and saying, hey, how in the hell are you people not doing anything about this fraud? You know, why is Corinne Brown sitting in prison for an African-American former congressperson, Democrat? Why did it take several short months to get her in prison, beginning in July of 2016, when she was actually running effectively for re-election and lost? Why did Comey go and the Justice Department go after her and put her away for 5 years over a less than $1 million charity fraud? Why did they go after Steve Stockman, a Republican from Texas congressman, and now he faces 10 years in prison? And yet they let this Clinton Foundation thing go on and on and on and on. And they, in so doing, encourage other people to emulate the Clintons, including, I'm sad to say, it looks like the Obamas. So, you know, this is a process that we encourage you to get familiar with Jason and with me via our respective Twitter accounts. Follow us on Twitter. Both of us try to tweet out a fair bit. If you have constructive suggestions, please send them to us. You know, we really do encourage those, and we get many, many helpful suggestions, which we appreciate. Without any further ado, Jason, I think we can go
absolutely
into the second slide.
You know, Charles, I find it very interesting who they choose to prosecute and who not with regard to all this Russia stuff. We were speaking earlier today with David Hawkins about how the control over the patent office gives corporations remarkable control, because if you control technology, you can basically control everything: planes, cars, communications. It's all technologically based. So it was interesting to see Wilbur Ross's response to my question about that. He didn't want to talk about it too much.
Well, yeah, you've put together this great playlist. I guess this is our 132nd show.
It's amazing.
And
I've got it right here, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and this being, there are 131 done, and now the table of contents, which is what this is, has 15,000 views alone.
It's great.
Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's one convenient place where everybody can get all of the Sunday with Charles videos and all of the Charles Ortel is Closing In videos. You've got Truman the Tiger and all these wonderful things.
And you've put, for I think all of them that have slide presentations, there's a link, I believe, in here for most of them.
It's you who has the microphone, but I think we'll be all right. We'll make it work.
Okay. You can't hear me? Or?
I can hear you, but there's a loose connection. When you do that,
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
All right.
Anyway, back to the slides.
So, yeah, so there's a large number of things up there for people to read, to watch if they want to. You can pull down the slides for free for each of these presentations. You could circulate those, or just one of them if you want to find one that's particularly helpful. And we're finding that a distressing number of people, and I say this with sort of smiling, have actually watched every single one of these shows. And I say it's distressing because that's a lot of time, and I feel a little bit bad that
I like that people are watching the shows. I think it's important.
But it's just thank you for doing that, and I know it's a lot of time. But on the other hand, We try to save you time by putting this information together in a format that it's analyzed for you, and it allows you to consider what we're saying at your leisure.
I think people are appreciating it, because when you watch the news, you get this like 2-minute little version of what they want you to have, and you go into such depth here that people who really want to try to understand it, even if they disagree with what you're saying, they at least get a full scope of what it's all about. So that's been a pretty unique approach that I think people appreciate.
Good. Well, so if we start here, this is the first link here is a short YouTube video that a fellow, I think it's Dave Janda.
Oh yeah.
Is that right?
It's been
all these briefings
pretty
in my
You
weekly
may
radio
have that
show.
wrong, but this is a short summary. But look, this thing has 61,000 views.
It's quite a few. He's very popular.
Is it Dave Janda?
That is Dave Janda, yes.
And he talks a bit about the whistleblowers, about Whitey and Mozambique, Larry Doyle. And he also talks about some of our work. So that's really good stuff, and we appreciate that. But whether, even if the House doesn't move to follow up on what Larry Doyle and Whitey Moynihan brought forward, other organs of government, I think, are moving. I think the Senate will move. And I think with your help, with the crowd's help, putting pressure on people to really study what actually happened, and more to the point, why the IRS and why the Justice Department and why the state's Attorney General did not go after this long ago. But it cannot be the case that it's all right for politically connected people to give small money to a campaign like Hillary Clinton's or some other Democrat's campaign, or for that matter George Bush's, and then escape legal liability for billions of dollars of tax penalties, and maybe even for extensive jail time. That can't be right.
There's little doubt that that's the way it's been going for a long, long time.
It would seem. So then there's a very interesting Washington Times piece. Apparently somebody, quote, with real experience in the Justice Department. If we take a step back, yes, Mueller was head of the FBI, but he wasn't in it. Yes, that's part of the Justice Department, but he wasn't trying cases, right? He was flying off and botching investigations as far as we could tell. But I hate this.
Get a bit of that.
But anyway, there is a good story here talking about this fellow here who does have a lot of experience in justice and is calling out Mueller for being, for prosecutorial misconduct. It's that simple.
Wow. So that's exactly what Dr. Corsi and Larry Klayman will allege in Judge Leon's courtroom tomorrow. And so it'll be interesting to see if the judge agrees with this DOJ veteran and the doctor.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
Let's hope. So these Washington Times pieces tend to be lengthier, so we won't go. Now, this by our friend Isabel Vincent over at New York Post, who has written about the Clinton Foundation. Is a very good, gifted writer, author, as well as investigative journalist. She writes here in the Post about some charity that was set up to provide help to students, and instead of doing that, they just had big fancy parties, and they spent not a dime on a grant to students. And this type of behavior disgusts me. I mean, I remember back in the Wall Street days, I mean, who spends $6,000 on limos for a charity event?
Wow.
Probably the Clinton Foundation is the answer. They're probably saying, only $6,000? We gave everybody a car. But,
charging up to $50,000 for a chance to party with lawmakers.
And has high-profile speakers such as who?
Hillary Clinton and Jesse Jackson.
I mean, this is just ridiculous. This is obviously not a charity. You cannot charge donors money for a chance to hobnob with Hillary, wife of Slickmeister Clinton. You just can't do that. Yet they're doing it. They're doing it in New York, and we'll see whether this charity is prosecuted by the IRS. But this is small beer. The last two programs that we did talked about the Clinton Global Initiative. This is like a mini-me version of the Clinton Global Initiative, which has garnered hundreds, well, they claim billions, perhaps over $100 billion for projects. And that wasn't a charity. But anyway, at least the New York Post and...
Well, they wanted to create economic opportunities.
Right, for the Clintons.
Yeah.
You get one of these cash ads,
Yeah.
And then there's a rumor here that Giuliani's saying that Assange should not be prosecuted.
Yeah, that was good. I was pleased to hear him say that.
And it's interesting when you think about it. I mean, to put the shares in perspective on the famous Larry Doyle and Moynihan thing, got 1.3 million shares. This has only 2.1 shares, 2.1 thousand shares. And they did a best of 2018 already on Zero Hedge. The Larry Doyle Moynihan story was the 4th most popular story of 2018.
Wow, and it came all the way at the end.
Right. And then so looking at this, though, I mean, I actually tend to agree here. Well, that's an awful picture of Hillary. But maybe it's a flattering.
Yeah, any that aren't.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think Trump should be more outspoken about this. He was reading WikiLeaks reports during the campaign. How can he not be, an ally to Assange and provide some form of reassurance that he's not going to be, trampled and thrown in a cell when he comes to the United States? I mean, they could pull him out of that embassy anytime if they wanted to.
Yeah, I guess Assange suggested that he was concerned he would be drone-stricken, whatever the right phrase is.
Well, right, because I think Hillary was allegedly talking about that.
Well, and that gets back, frankly, to the famous or infamous July 26, 2016 email that the mainstream press seized on, where I'm saying to Fox and everybody, get to London and see Assange.
Oh, your email.
Yeah,
right.
That's because I saw an interview where Assange was saying, hey, I have information that'll put Hillary Clinton in prison. That sounded good to me.
Exactly.
Because it specifically said it had something to do with, everything to do with the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah.
So it is possible that elements of a deal are starting to come together wherein, maybe Assange gets, is allowed to leave the UK and is allowed to come to the United States, is allowed to testify.
That would be extremely interesting.
That would be extremely interesting, because I suspect that the folks at WikiLeaks have a lot more information than they have already released, especially pertaining to the various parts of the core Clinton Foundation and its various affiliates around the world, both inside and outside the US. I think there are a lot of requests for money. There's a lot of email traffic around those requests. There's a lot of emails, as a guess, where a potential donor to the Clinton Foundation is also asking for certain types of favors. There are a lot of after-action grant reports to and from governments that have given money to the Clinton Foundation. There's probably a lot of panicked email when the Obama administration got into power and realized just how horrific the Clinton Foundation financial statements and filings were. And so, as a guess, Assange has a lot of that stuff. Or WikiLeaks has a lot of that stuff, and let's hope we get to see that soon. So I don't know if we can go to the next thingy, but Mitt Romney really was, ridiculous in his opening move as an incoming senator. He pens this Washington Post op-ed piece that alleges that Donald Trump doesn't have the character to be president. And he did, the one thing that he did have that Mittens did not have in 2012 is that Donald Trump has the electoral college votes.
You know what, let's just do this real quick.
1 second.
Okay, there we go. So you put that right on the tie.
Yeah, I'd like to, but sorry.
Okay, sorry everybody. Ooh. Okay, there we go.
You're seeing the sausage made.
Not Hillary Clinton style.
No.
That should work.
Is that better?
Yes.
So Mittens enters as a senator, a junior senator now from Utah, and decides, and you don't just get an editorial in the Washington Post, even as an incoming senator, without a certain amount of advanced planning. So this was staged, and he decided as his opening move that he would write an op-ed that I think, for somebody who has 1 day's experience as a senator, if that, I don't know when he was sworn in, it's a little bold to start this way. And obviously what he thinks, and maybe the people behind him think, is that as somebody who was selected to be the presidential nominee of the Republican Party in 2012, that he is best positioned to take on Trump through the primaries if that happens in 2020. But
no,
I mean, I just give the guy zero style. I mean, I don't even want to hear an argument why Mitt Romney should have any position other than being a junior senator from Utah at this point. And it's significant that his niece, who's the chairperson of the Republican Party, is taking Trump's side on this.
Over Uncle Mitt.
Mittens, yeah. Willard.
So now, wait a minute. What was Mitt Romney before when he was running for president? He wasn't a senator ever before this?
Never been a senator, no. He was governor of Massachusetts.
Oh my God.
He tried to be
Right.
a senator against Teddy Kennedy, and Ted Kennedy, said, listen, Mitt, I'm not going to drive you off a bridge into Chappaquiddick or whatever, but you're not going to win. And he was just destroyed in that election.
It's amazing to me that they would try to take somebody who's already lost once and that's their best person is a proven loser.
I know, but it's just really, you don't do stuff like this. The Senate is supposed to be a club, there's protocols, he's not even there. He's acting like, what's her name?
Ocasio-Cortez.
Her first name is Alexandria?
Yeah. Alexandra.
Yeah, I mean, he's acting like her. Only she's more polished.
Mm.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
She's wearing nail polish.
So if we, here's an interesting zero hedge piece about the state of the market. The market was all over the place today, this morning, the stock market. It was, in the morning it was down a lot, and it briefly recovered, it closed down a bit at the end. And we're starting to see big banks, Soc Gen is the old Société Générale out of France. We're starting to see people who would never before dare to predict that stock markets could go down 50%.
Whoa.
And you're seeing negative performance really around the world.
What is this showing us? Saudi Arabia and UAE are the only two countries to make money in 2018?
In dollars, that's what it would seem.
What the hell is that about?
Well, the markets were, overpriced, basically, the stock markets.
But why are UAE and Saudi Arabia, which are essentially one and the same?
They're small. These are small markets. You have to look at the deep markets. But let's see who the worst performers are at the very bottom.
United States?
No, Argentina.
Turkey?
Look at this one.
China?
Exactly. So China, as Mr. Trump likes to refer to it as, China has got to be really hurting here. And as bad as the uncertainty is in the United States, it's a lot worse in China. I'm going to be on I-24 News tonight at 8:05 p.m. talking about just this, that is, as much tension as there may be, our markets, which are far larger, our capital markets, our consumer markets, are down far less than China's. And so I think kudos to Trump for trying to use the leverage that we have now to refashion the way in which the largest country in the world, the largest military in the world, the United States, interacts with a country in China that is trying to take us on.
Now, Charles, people who are watching us on YouTube are suspecting that tomorrow may be SHTF Day.
Something hits the fan?
Yeah, I'm still hung up on this Saudi Arabia and UAE being the only two, and by kind of a large margin. Like, what does that equal to? How much money did they?
It's tiny, Jason. This is not actually the best way to present this chart, because those UAE and Saudi Arabia are tiny little markets compared to stock markets. There are not that many publicly traded companies. This just measures the percentage rate of return in the index for UAE and the index for Saudi Arabia, which can easily be manipulated because it's so small. Now, this is near and dear to your heart. This is an interest, speaking of Saudi Arabia, this Guardian piece, Netflix had a comedy show that they pulled because Saudi Arabia had requested that they pull this comedy show that was criticizing the government. And I really think that that's wrong.
Absolutely.
I think that you ought to be allowed, I mean, you can't shout fire in a crowded movie theater. That you can't do.
It's a stand-up comedian.
Right, but this is and how many stand-up comedians are there? I don't know if this guy is in Saudi Arabia or not, but...
no, he'd be dead if he was in Saudi Arabia.
But I do think that at the highest level of this country, we can pick and choose our friends. And Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman is making noises about how he does want to modernize the country. Come on, dude. I mean, some of the most endearing humor. Go watch Don Rickles perform at the 1985, after the 1985 second inauguration. It's hysterically funny, where he comes in and he just takes shot after President Reagan and Nancy, and it's really very funny. It's a testament when that kind of thing happens as to how well organized a country is, that you can make fun in a genial way about your leadership. And if you can't do that, then clearly there's something wrong inside the country.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I'm not really familiar with this comedian, although I have seen ads around town here for his show, The Patriot Act, which is an obvious send-up of that insane law that restricts all of our rights, our freedom of privacy, et cetera. And the ironic thing is now, I think many more people will know this comedian whose name is Hassan Minhaj. Certainly sounds like he is Middle Eastern descent at very least. And this is troubling, Charles, because, I wonder if people will now cancel their Netflix subscriptions. I mean, there have been a lot of people canceling on Patreon, and I certainly don't support these kind of actions, but we gotta be very sensitive of who is getting punished by these acts of disobedience by canceling the Patreon account. I think Jack Conte still has a lot of money, but Crowdsource the Truth is in danger of losing subscribers. I'm sorry to be ADD, but look at this here. It says China holds its breath as a probe prepares to land on the far side of the moon.
Well, I hope they're sending those guys up in spacesuits and not expecting them to live on the moon without...
It's a probe, though, so it's a robot.
I'm just teasing.
They're going to have a lot of Pink Floyd music there.
Yeah. But on the subject of the excessive control and influence, not only of the tech giants, but also of the payment processing platforms.
Exactly.
That's an area that I think that is completely out of balance. Everyone says, oh, it's benign. There's MasterCard and Visa, and then there's American Express, and there's PayPal. There are not enough alternatives out there. And when one of these big giants, if it's allowed to say as MasterCard, we're not going to allow Charles Ortel to buy something because of what I said on air. That's no longer a payment processing thing. That strikes me as you crossed an important line there.
Absolutely.
And you should not get whatever immunities you get from lawsuits
right.
if you're no longer simply just a payment processing service. Equally, same is true for Netflix and Google and these other places.
Patreon and all those.
And so really, Thomas Jefferson, who, every human has faults, but Thomas Jefferson really deserves enormous credit at the time that he did it, of drafting the Virginia Statement on Religious Liberty, which ultimately was one of the more important rights in the Bill of Rights, not the least of which also for drafting the Declaration of Independence. But he encouraged, and the spirit behind his drafting of that centrally important law was to encourage all voices to be heard, including the ones that are controversial.
And especially the ones
exactly, and then encourage the crowd. If you say something that's controversial and wrong, then, if I say something that's controversial and wrong, come to me, tell me why you think it's wrong. If you're right, I'll get up here and I'll say, I said on XYZ show this, and somebody came to me and said it was wrong for these reasons. I listened, I said, you know what? The person has a point. I was wrong. I'm sorry. That's the way you move forward as a society. But if you suddenly you let imperfect humans decide, what is accepted wisdom and what is not accepted wisdom, you go, as the Democrats are fond of saying, or Obama, we want to go forward, not backward. I mean, but you're going backward when you do that.
It's worse than backward. This article, more than almost any other, I want this to soak in for everybody for a second. This is globalism. Here we have a guy who is American, stand-up comedian Hassan Minhaj, okay? He's speaking in America on an American-run television program on Netflix, and we've got the government of Saudi Arabia decreeing that you're not allowed to say that, and Netflix enforcing it. This is absolutely crazy. Anybody who has canceled their Patreon account because they don't like what Patreon did to Sargon of Akkad, I think should immediately cancel their Netflix account. And as a matter of fact, I'm even more upset about the fact that a foreign government, particularly Saudi Arabia, can dictate what gets said on television.
Well, see, what I would say is that the foreign government in Saudi Arabia would absolutely have a right inside Saudi Arabia to say you can't see this in Saudi Arabia, this show. That's reasonable, if that's what they want to do. And then more and more people will leave Saudi Arabia, right?
Or get killed for trying.
But for Netflix to say, we're not going to air this show in the U.S. or internationally or globally in reaction to a complaint by the Saudi government, that's bogus.
It's worse than bogus. It's a real demonstration of the power that these foreign governments now have over our day-to-day lives by controlling these corporations. I would think it's obvious that whoever in Saudi Arabia said this has got substantial financial control. Is it Al-Walid bin Talal? Well, he's criticizing MBS, so you would think Al-Walid bin Talal would like that. I mean,
no, he wouldn't like that.
Criticizing MBS?
Oh, good. Sorry, MBS. I got the people.
I mean, I'm just saying, who owns Netflix? Who's calling the shots over there?
It's a publicly traded company.
Right. So someone in Saudi Arabia can come and scoop up all the shares and then say, we're taking this off, or I'm doing something to the stock that's going to screw it up.
Or who knows who's a big investor in it. But I mean, this is an area where, across the political spectrum, we need to have an open debate, a thoughtful debate, much as, if you'll remember, George W. Bush, he was pushed to have a thoughtful consideration of stem cell research. And
so stupid.
I understand, but I'm just saying, but this is a big topic here, the question of censorship, foreign influence, and also the power of the credit card processing companies and payment processing companies to deny citizens access to basic goods and services. I mean, it's a big issue.
We're getting a lot of good information from our comments here. We've got Kyle Lua saying they canceled the Netflix subscription when Obama became involved. For POTUS 45 says Obama is running Netflix. Mark Marston says Netflix run by Obama now. This is interesting. Sandra tells us that the Saudis own 48% of the UK stock market.
That much? That seems very high.
I don't know, but I mean, even if that's incorrect, it demonstrates how the transfer of power from the government to private contractors puts a tremendous amount of power in the hands of corporations. And we don't get to vote for who runs a corporation. It's just whoever has the money buys the corporation and takes it over. And if that corporation is handling communications for the U.S. government, transportation for the U.S. government, the military, like why we're allowed to have these Blackwater and Osprey Global and private military companies. It's pretty scary, Charles, to see how power is going away from the government, by the people, for the people, and of the people, and into the hands of oligarchs in whatever country they reside in.
It's not good. And then we have, this is hysterical, Newsweek, they used to jokingly call it Nudespeak because all these racy pictures from time to time would show up.
Really?
Yeah, back in the 70s.
Huh.
But here, this actually got published today at 9:55 in the morning. Donald Trump will resign the presidency in exchange for immunity for him and his family, former Bush advisor says. This is ridiculous.
That is ridiculous.
I used to like that Weekly World News because it was so wrong.
It showed like Hillary Clinton with her alien baby.
Exactly. Alien prefers Bush or whatever. And I mean, this story, Alan J. Steinberg, and
was an advisor to George W. Bush, the stupidest president maybe ever
in modern history, maybe. This is a guy, look at this, a former Environmental Protection Agency regional administrator. I mean,
very high up.
Really high up. And I'm sure he, first thing in the morning, George W. would call this guy up every day and say, which country should I bomb? This is a ridiculous piece of garbage. And it's just amazing to me that it would make it into this supposed once great magazine. It's just the editors there they must be
smoking.
Kurt
Eichenwald is one of them, and they missed. There's supposed to be an A right here. So I don't know. Newsweek is pretty bad. in my view, Charles.
And then, but this is funny, speaking of other media, here we have a piece about Jill Abramson, who used to run the New York Times, and what does she say? Slamming the newspaper over anti-Trump coverage. Now, to put this in perspective, again, on sometimes measurement schemes like these, the share mechanism are very useful in comparative terms, right? This has only gotten, Jill Abramson is a very famous person. I mean, she ran the New York Times, right? This story only gets 368 shares. Larry Doyle and John Moynihan's story gets 1.3 million shares. Gives you a sense.
People are interested.
People are really, not so much interested in the fish wrapper. Not really all that. Yeah, everybody knows it's a piece of garbage and we don't read it. But on the other hand, this Moynihan Doyle stuff, people care a lot about that. That's very interesting to me, but also noteworthy that this denizen of the New York Times would actually, put her successor, this guy Dean Baquet, or Baquet, or however you pronounce his name, under the microscope. Because, I really do think the New York Times, I remember it, I can remember it back as far as the 60s. And I remember that it was fun as a young adult and a teenager, and then even in college or whatever, to read the New York Times, because there very frequently were long articles written by famous people who'd done a lot of research, challenging the status quo from one direction or another direction. And it was really worth a quarter or 50 cents or whatever it cost.
Not much more than that.
No, but that was a lot of money back in the day.
Now it's not even worth pressing silly putty onto.
I wouldn't even pick it, like if I were stuck in an airport lounge with a choice between reading, I don't know, the instruction book for the microwave, to turn, and the New York Times, I would probably read the instruction book just for giggles.
United Airlines gives you American cinematographers sometimes, which I find really weird because I don't think most people would care to read about what type of lights were used on Planet of the Apes. Yeah. But then I like those articles.
But then you were talking about Warren and initially, and this show here, this is really funny. Now, I happen to watch this. I don't know if you can.
You want sound?
Well, but look at how they bought the lid.
Senator Pocahontas. Princess Socialist bullcrap drinking some of New Year's firewater.
I mean, and this is going to go on and on and on, but it really was a bad move. I don't think it's your strongest move to say,
running for president, let's have
drinking a beer, drinking a brewski.
I mean, there's certainly nothing wrong with drinking a beer, but I agree, the optics of this, it just doesn't look that good. The other thing is there's something about, doing the Periscope, live stream with the hearts, like, I guess she's trying to...
Is now in here.
She's taking the top off with her hand.
Want a beer?
I'll pass on the beer.
She should have used her
Okay,
teeth.
say hello.
Yes.
So, this is my sweetie.
Now you get to meet her
I
husband.
think she's hammered.
And I'm crazy. I love you too. Thank you.
He's smacking her
I'm
butt.
glad you're here.
It's just like...
Who
This whole thing is way out of control, Joe.
it's like... I don't know. I seriously think this did not help her. And the fact that she would even do something this stupid
Poor judgment.
is further testament to the fact that she is unlikely to ever be even the nominee. She's certainly not going to be debating Donald Trump.
No, and I mean, listen, all joking aside, I think it's a pretty poor choice for a candidate to do a live stream like this from her house because it goes beyond, I guess she's trying to seem, what's the word I'm looking for? Approachable.
Relatable.
Relatable, exactly. But this just makes her seem kind of like low rent. She's like doing like a crappy Periscope stream drunk in her kitchen.
And we don't even know what kind of probably not even decent beer.
Next thing you know, she's going to come out with a video accusing me of, flying drones over Chernobyl or something like the other morons doing live streams like this tend to do.
But anyway, so that was pretty funny. And then actually, yesterday there wasn't much on, and so Fox aired this 7-part series, Scandalous, and even I, who know, I think I know a fair amount about the whole period 97 forward, I had forgotten some very important details, and this you'll see it below it, further down. There should be a list of all of them. Maybe not. I guess not.
Scandalous.
Yeah, the episodes are all in there. So if you want, you could watch these, and they're very, very good. It really goes to some considerable depth, reminding people that this was about a sitting president of the United States working with Vernon Jordan and others to subvert. It wasn't so much about sex, although that was part of it. It was that the president was using government resources to subvert the judicial process. Does that sound familiar at all to you?
And that was when Bill Clinton was impeached?
Yeah, this goes all into that.
I don't know that show, Scandalous.
Yeah, it just came out. So to summarize, some people have said to me, all right, Charles, you go on and on and on, this problem and that problem. Could you just give us a summary of what a decent person who would be tasked, you're a rich donor, you're a government, you hire some lawyer and you say, take a look at this Clinton family. Bill won't leave me alone. Hillary won't stop talking about stuff. All Chelsea wants to talk about is diarrhea and my money. Tell me whether I should give this freaking Clinton Foundation any money. So a high-level summary of why you shouldn't. The 14-step program that any lawyer or accountant should have seen includes the following points. They never actually organized a truly independent entity. An independent entity would be...
It's like stop, end of show, end of sentence. You don't need anything more than that.
Right. So the story, if I were to create the Ortel Foundation, put $100 million into that thing, and I say, Jason, I want you to be a functionary at my foundation.
Sure.
Well, you wouldn't say that, I hope, because you know that you can't do that. If I put $100 million and we want to get tax exemption for it, I can't control the affairs of that foundation. It's not independent.
Charles, I'll take care of it.
Right, exactly. You can reach me
I know
in
this
Monte
guy,
Carlo.
Doug Band. I think we could bring him in.
Right, yeah. Right, but so just straight up, it's obvious that they did not actually organize a legal entity, and if they tried to, it certainly wasn't independent from the Clinton family from the get-go, all right? The application that they put into the IRS, just as Bill was getting ready to lie under oath in this scandalous thing, the application that involves Vernon Jordan's wife and other close Clinton connections, everybody connected to this thing is closely connected to the Clintons, is riddled with false and materially misleading statements. It should never have been approved. It omits material items which, had it been known by a real neutral IRS, they were never given an authority for this. They start, some people like to screw up from the very beginning. It's just my job is to screw up. So I screw up on October 23rd, 1997. I'm going to screw up the whole year.
Hit
like
the ground
tax
running.
return, I don't need to do that. Bill's the president. He just got maybe impeached. I got to focus on that. We need to use this thing to raise money to pay our lawyers. Lawyers say we don't have to file a tax return, maybe. So they didn't file this tax return for this crucial period, 23 October 1997 to 31 December 1997, when people were scurrying around like crazy trying to find a way to pressure Monica Lewinsky to lie under oath. So that entire period...
How do we know people were trying to get her
because it's
to lie
in
under
this 7-part series, Scandalous. It's multiple reports.
Has she admitted that?
Oh, absolutely. You've got her voice on tape.
Wow.
In this whole thing. And so we have to go back over this period. And so you can't... people love to say, well, Benghazi's separate from this. No, it's all connected. This is all a pattern and practice of the Clinton family and their cronies and associates following on the heels of the Bushes. This is a pattern and practice of lying under oath and using supposed charities for personal enrichment, wealth accumulation, and political gain. That's what this is all about. And I'm only on the second now, or third of these 14 points. Now, typically the way I would work if I hired a lawyer and I asked them to come and give me this advice, and you got to this third point, I'd say, stop the meter. I ain't giving a bean to the Clinton Foundation. I don't need to know about points 4 through 14.
Right.
But I think I'll take people through it just so that it's,
Right.
So it's very clear when you look at the file that is in the public domain, and the file is not as complete as it should be, that what they were doing here is using the same groupings of people and offices to mix in raising money for legal fees, raising money after Bill was not convicted for the Kobe Bryant, apology ring, which in the case of Kobe Bryant, he gave his
Pink diamond.
Yeah.
And a specially modified Lamborghini with an automatic transmission.
Right, and all Hillary got was a Senate seat.
Oh, she got much more cash out of that.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. But clearly they were blending all that, both her election campaign and then her re-election campaign and the various campaigns. They never registered truthfully, in key states. I mean, and it's not like a small thing. It's not a technical violation. You can't say, well, I'm going to come into Massachusetts, or California or whatever, and I'm not going to tell you about all these defects. I mean, you have to disclose this stuff. But of course, they said, these are Democrat-controlled states. But wait a minute. One of the states at the time was controlled by who? Mitt Romney.
Ooh.
You know, he was governor of Massachusetts for crucial periods here where he didn't get what was going on, in theory, at the Clinton Foundation. Now, it took until June 9th, 2006. Remember, this thing was formed on October 23rd, 1997. And under Arkansas law and then under New York law, when they started soliciting in New York, they absolutely had to get an independent certified audit. And it wasn't until the 9th of June, 2006, 10 years into the process, that they actually hired notorious BKD, that is to say, which is a poor excuse for something that claims to be an accounting firm, at least the portions of it that are based in Little Rock.
They're personal friends with Truman the Tiger.
Exactly. You know, they get that ridiculous place to, on the heels of providing scandalously poor work, starting in March of 2002 for 2001 and 2000. On the heels of doing that, it is not until June 9th, 2006 that what passes for a real and potentially compliant audit is issued. But it's grievously wrong. It's riddled with errors. They then go on and the Clinton Foundation, that is to say, claims filing these documents across state lines using the mails another way. They send these non-compliant audits into California, into New York, into multiple states saying, yeah, we got an audit. It's a piece of garbage. It's not an
mail
audit.
Fraud at that point.
Exactly. And then they start doing this thing has never been authorized to do any work outside, not of Arkansas, outside of Little Rock. They weren't authorized to buy the presidential retreat that they did buy outside Hot Springs, Arkansas, where Bill Clinton may have actually derived a personal benefit. He had an interest, I believe, an economic interest in that purchase, getting a share of the proceeds. They never disclosed that properly, and they were never authorized to do any work outside of Little Rock. I mean, it's not that even Rod Rosenstein could figure this one. Even dopey James Comey should be able to look into the file and say, you know, it says here I ain't going to do anything outside Little Rock, and now Bill is setting up this economic opportunity for himself initiative in Harlem, the chai, the this, the that, all these initiatives. Does nobody in the IRS understand the difference between Little Rock and everything that isn't Little Rock? It's not that complicated. And then I believe, using the various ties that the Clinton family and the Bush family have, these people close to the Clintons have been obstructing investigations into the Clinton family. There's no way to explain why Mueller, Comey, and Rosenstein couldn't get an investigation of the Clinton Foundation across the line in 4 long years, from 2001 to 2005, other than the fix was in. And we need to go back and understand who put that fix in, what was that fix, what may have Comey, Mueller, Rosenstein, and others either gotten or not been punished for in that time frame. That's what a real investigation should, not going into Paul Manafort's house at 5 o'clock in the morning to find out how much he was paying for suits. Although, maybe Manafort, what he did, maybe it's wrong. We'll find out in the end. This is a real investigation.
Well, and that particular point is underscored by the fact that from the first time we ever heard about the Trump Foundation until the time it was legally censured, sanctioned, and closed down was like 2 years.
Right. Yeah, and here, 4 years you got going on. And then, we look at the Clinton family. They were living, they did not, I think they owned a small house in Little Rock. I don't know if they sold it before he went to become president, but they never lived high in the hog prior to leaving the White House. And then suddenly they automatically deserved to have 2 mansions, one in D.C., one in Chappaqua. Of course, Hillary thought she was going to win. And so, for her convenience and the convenience of Mark and the money-eschewing Chelsea Clinton and diarrhea-loving Chelsea Clinton, they said, well, we can't just have one mansion. Well, let's buy the neighboring one and make a compound. So their lifestyles, very few people who actually work for a living and are successful live the way they live. And then nobody sits there and says, now, wait a minute. The only thing they've ever done is, other than hold political office,
steal furniture,
is to run a charity, a supposed charity. And nobody stops to say, now, wait a minute, could it be that these powerful people and governments and companies or whatever, investment firms, are contributing to the charity to get something back from the Secretary of State or the putative next president of the United States, or through Bill's legacy connections in all these multilateral organizations around the world. And we get to point 12. We're going to make a big deal about the Trump Foundation, which if they made an error, they should be punished. But of over a $2.8 million amount involving the Trump Foundation, remembering the Trump family was rich before Donald Trump was born, right? You can't blame Donald Trump's wealth solely on him, right? He inherited a lot of wealth. His father and I think grandfather were successful. And then he, at a young age, did a bunch of deals and made a bunch of money. And
I think his grandfather worked for the FBI and was doing something with Tesla.
Really? Way back when? Okay, I don't know anything about that.
I think so. Real quick, Charles, Jackass Dad 2 on Periscope here, who's got to be a good source of information, says Trump likes Rosenstein, doesn't want to fire him because he worked hard with Kavanaugh. I wonder where Jackass Dad 1 is.
Yeah, Rosenstein, unless he has been singing like a canary this whole time, Rosenstein needs to go.
It is interesting how out of the view he's been.
He needs to be put under scrutiny. But on point 12, it's not simply that it was a bad thing for the Clinton family while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State to take a contract that yielded them $17.6 million for Bill's, quote, service as honorary chancellor to Laureate, an entity that needed the favor and support of the U.S. and other foreign governments. That's not the only thing that's bad about that. $17.6 million is a massive number, far bigger than $2.8 million for those who are not good with numbers. And it's absurd that they still have not corrected their tax forms to disclose all these payments. Chelsea's job at McKinsey, Chelsea's job at Avenue, Bill's compensation from Info USA with Hillary and Chelsea's reimbursement for expenses, the Laureate deal. On and on and on. Multiple Clinton Foundation donors have compensated the Clinton family or reimbursed them illegally for outlandish expenses. And none of this is actually disclosed properly in the Clinton Foundation forms, because if you did, the authorities would be forced to shut it down. Okay? So then I would argue that many counterparties, the Bank of America in Little Rock over the large loan they made, above $20 million, to the Clinton Foundation in 2004, supposedly secured by pledges, except that the Clinton Foundation in 2004 didn't keep track of pledges by their own admission. They said, we don't do that.
Well, what influence would Bank of America have over like Visa or MasterCard? And also, why are Visa, MasterCard kind of the same?
They merged, I think.
So there you go. There is no competition in credit card processing. Why is that not a...
Well, American Express would be another one.
But
they merged with Diners, I think.
But nobody except for Rodney Dangerfield in 1978 uses Diners Club. Oh, no, sorry, that was Carte Blanche.
That's right.
But nobody uses Diners Club. Who's ever seen a Diners Club card outside of a diner in 1970? Yeah. But the point is, why isn't that a monopoly? Why are they...
A near monopoly, exactly.
And they're exerting all this control.
And most importantly, for people who think they're off the hook, Charles, this is ancient history, you're talking about 2004. Well, let's talk about the period from the 2nd of November 2013 forward, when the Clinton family and their cronies and their professional advisors allowed paperwork to go in, concentrating control over the main Clinton Foundation, and then by extension all its subsidiaries and affiliates, into the hands of Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton. Something that, remember I said in the very beginning of this, point 1, you've got to create an independent organization. An organization that is controlled between board meetings and at board meetings by only 3 members of the Clinton Foundation family is, by definition, not independent and certainly not a public charity. So, I mean, I did that in, 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. A lawyer might charge, a potential donor, I don't know how much for this sort of analysis, but there is no way that a serious person who would be worried about tax exposure in the United States would allow a donation to go in personally, or worse, from a private foundation, we're going to get into that in a second, to any part of this Clinton Foundation mess.
Tomcat, New Jersey, who does have a lot of good information, says that Visa used to be known as Bank AmeriCard, and back then it was Bank America's credit card.
Could be, yeah.
Wow. So I think this is Bank of America trying to put pressure on, or successfully putting pressure on Patreon and others to prevent people from speaking out. This is crazy, the level of censorship that's going on.
So last year, almost exactly a year ago, we did that Crocodile Dundee thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to pull it up or not, but
Sure. I'll get it over here while you talk.
yeah. So that was a good session. I believe we had Michael Smith on with us from wherever he was. He wasn't in Australia, but
I think he was in Thailand.
Thailand somewhere, yeah. And unbeknownst to us, the FBI and others had been gearing up to do a lot of excellent work. And John Solomon broke a piece that I think the next day about the FBI opening an investigation, which went like wildfire around the world. And then he followed it up with a piece in March here, tying together this issue of that's not the next one.
Sorry.
Of Alexander Downer. And Alexander Downer's, the curious fact that Alexander Downer was Foreign Minister of Australia when he caused the Clinton Foundation to receive money from the Australian government in the many tens of millions of dollars over time for this illegal supposed HIV/AIDS initiative, which didn't actually exist anywhere, let alone didn't lawfully exist. Yet this is the very same guy who signs a memorandum of understanding with Bill Clinton, February of 2006. This dude then becomes the ambassador, we would call him an ambassador of Australia to the UK, and he's the guy who has the drunken wine bar conversation with Papadopoulos, which supposedly reports to authorities, and it ends up as an argument for why there should be a special counsel. Now, we haven't yet woven these strands together, and Mr. Huber was supposed to be doing that, the U.S. attorney in Mitt Romney's home state there, adopted home state. And the question is, what the hell has he been doing on this subject? We put this together a year ago.
Yep.
And what has Huber been doing?
Well, he's probably been dining with Papadopoulos or having wine or whatever. It's the second time we've mentioned Mitt Romney today on the program. I just wanted to show this picture to everybody again, Charles, because as far as pictures, saying 1,000 words, this is the most uncomfortable look on Romney's face in this photo. And I just noticed this today looking at it. So they've got these little, I don't know what, mini crab cakes or scallops or something down here. And Trump is having soup, so he's waiting for Mitt to eat the poison crab cakes.
Well, Mitt ordered it.
Perhaps he omitted something from the order.
He nitwitted.
He emitted something after eating it. Sorry.
That's right. So we have introduced before this Michael Smith. If we hit this link here, this is a summary of the pieces that he had done by November of 2016. November 9th, 2016. Just scroll down it if you would, Jason. Take a look at how many pieces this guy did. Just a few. Starting April 24th, 2015.
Whoa.
He's up to what?
Wow. Does he do anything else?
Yeah, lots of. He does 43 different pieces.
That's amazing.
And does the Washington Post do anything serious? Nah. New York Times? Nah.
We should remind
Journal?
people that Michael Smith is a former law enforcement officer.
Detective, absolutely. And he should be followed and supported. He does great work, not just on the Clinton Foundation. He's a great guy. G'day, mate. And we need to get him back on.
Yeah, that would be good. He's very hard to reach. He's busy as hell.
Exactly. So then we have something interesting happening. There's these two tweets, so we have to hit one and then the other. Yeah. This is a tweet that went out I think last night. This is one Anthony J. Pratt, who I will tell you is an Australian billionaire, with Melania at 10:09 a.m. on January 1st, 2019. Okay, this is at Mar-a-Lago.
Okay.
All right, we go to the next tweet.
Why is it saying she's very warm?
I don't know, she's just a warm person. So this is 7:01 this morning. Okay, he's at Mar-a-Lago. That's kind of interesting. Why would he have that American flag draped over? Maybe this would appear to be in his room, maybe?
What's the purpose of these tweets?
Well, he's just letting you know he's at Mar-a-Lago, and he's obviously close enough to be friendly with Melania Trump. So if you then go and you say, well, who is this Anthony Pratt guy? And credit to one of our accounting friends who brought this to my attention this morning. If you go back into the slide.
He's here with us in Manhattan.
It says that, although he's Australian, it says he's pledged $4 billion to create 5,000 Australian, 5,000 U.S. manufacturing jobs, and to give $1 billion to philanthropy in his lifetime.
Let me ask you something. If you took $4 billion, I mean, that doesn't seem like that many jobs.
It's high-paying jobs. It's a lot.
Okay.
And so if we get, this is a paper and executive and a big set of stuff. But if you hit this, this is from Wikipedia, which you always have to check. This is a guy who's been very successful. He's an industrialist, basically. He's one of the world's largest privately owned packaging and paper companies, and that's an industry. Says his net worth is 12.9 billion Australian, which, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That industry, packaging and paper, is an industry that has, I guess he comes from a family of philanthropists, is an industry that can have environmental challenges, to put it politely. And so this guy, for some reason, found himself interested in what the, oh boy, he worked at McKinsey.
Uh-oh.
That's interesting.
Well, and he's also Jewish, so people are going to have a problem with him as a result of that.
Oh, well, I don't.
I don't either, but this is the type of thing that people seem to say. Is he related to Whitney at all? Pratt and Whitney?
No.
How do we know?
He's not.
Wait, what's this? May 4th, he pledged in the presence of Donald Trump to invest $2 billion to create 5,000. Okay, so did he do that?
Yeah, well, let's. But if we go back into the slide, if you would, please.
Yeah.
It says in 2007 he committed to invest more than $1 billion over the ensuing decade in recycling, infrastructure, and clean energy. He fulfilled his pledge 5 years early, so he fulfilled it by 2012, right? Yet there's no information in this Clinton Foundation filings about $1 billion from Pratt. Okay, and if what he was doing was merely saying, I like the Clinton operation, and because I like the direction you're going, I will make a separate decision to invest $1 billion to make a return on my business in the United States of America. That is a separate and apart thing from charity. It has nothing to do with charity. And this is an example, a textbook example. This Mr. Pratt could tell us exactly, if he were willing to, what he did, and whether what he was told about this Clinton Global Grifters Initiative, which I get the impression from my first checks on Anthony Pratt that he's a stand-up person who would not want his name associated with these frauds, and perhaps would be very helpful to us coming forward. And I tweeted to him, I said, listen, if you want a private briefing, either your people, your lawyers, whatever, what we think, why we think this is an important issue, I'm happy to do that.
Well, Frank R. on Periscope is saying that his grandfather and that guy's father were golf buddies. So, I don't know. President Clinton, he committed a former, yeah, I mean, yeah, what do we know about this guy? Food security, wait a minute, what's this? Since taking over the company, Pratt has taken a strong interest in sustainable agriculture, food security, water issues, stating that his
Clean
motive...
water.
What?
Clean water.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who say that that's the next thing that they're coming after.
So that's just one area. Australia is one of the many governments we've talked about. We'll put back up this, if you would, Jason, this press release from Ireland. And yeah, see, they're
Breaking the law.
breaking the law as we speak. Thanks for making our case that much easier. Here's the September 29th, 2006 statement before Hillary's reelection as Senate, to the Senate. She needed to be reelected because she was fixing, as they say, to run for president, something she announced January 20th, 2007. But here's the government of Ireland saying they put 50 million euros in, they're going to put another 70 million euros into what? Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, which does not exist on that date.
Didn't you tell me something about Dennis O'Brien or Digicel the other day? Somebody died?
The CEO of Digicel died.
Did we talk about that on here?
I think so, a little bit. Yeah.
It's certainly strange. Do we know any more about that? The circumstances surrounding his death?
I haven't followed it. But so here, this is a press release still out there. Clinton's still bragging about working for these various governments, something that you cannot do. It says Chai has partnered with the government of Mozambique and the government of Lesotho. Well, if you're just furthering the activities of a government, in particular if you're doing so when you were supposed to stay, last time I checked, Little Rock is not in Mozambique, and Little Rock is not in Lesotho, and the opposite is also not the case. So, I mean, it's ridiculous that they would put this kind of a press release out. What lawyer looked at that press release before it? Well, did anybody care?
Kimiki Gibson?
Well, I don't know who looked at it, but it's just ridiculous because in that time frame in 2006, the tax return for the Clinton Foundation from 1998 through 2007 claims on the IRS return, it says no government income of any kind. Here's Ireland saying we gave them 120 million euros. Right. And then this, if we hit this Unitate thing, the fact that Ireland and Australia were so eager to give money, this one here, were so eager to give money to the Clinton Foundation probably helped the people who put Unitate. If we go to the very back of this.
The last page?
Yeah. I think it's the last page. It probably convinced the people who put Unitate together, well, Australia's in, Ireland's in, there we go. If we look at the top of this pile, this is the most recent financial statement I could find online. They're claiming that from 2006 to 2016, Unitate gave something that does not exist, Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative Chai, $603,899,000,
wow,
making it by far and away the biggest donor to the Clinton Foundation. And then you see down here, there's a joint venture, Chai and UNICEF is another $57.9 million.
Wow.
So you would have thought, this thing is published in 2017. If the argument is that Unitate gave Clinton Health Access Initiative, a different name, you would have thought that name would go in here, or maybe you'd show for some years it went to Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, for other years Clinton Health Access Initiative. But then you look at this, it's not like this is something where you could say, this is great, we should feel good about this. The largest donation is to Chai, an entity that didn't exist. The next largest is to the Global Fund, an entity that was run and by Rajat Gupta, a man who spent time in prison. UNICEF, in my mind, is a slush fund. I haven't looked at the Global Drug Facility. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a slush fund. But look at the scale. Clinton Foundation, $600 million. The next largest are 249 and 239. And
that's weird.
Query, why isn't this on top of that? Because everything else is. But anyway, and where's the report for 2017?
I like it that you figured out UNICEF was a slush fund in third grade.
Yeah, well, didn't have much else to do. So if we go back into the next page then of the slides. Next page, yeah. So we have said before that private foundation donors, that is to say the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Johnson Foundation in New Jersey, the Ford Foundation, and many large foundations have given money to the Clinton Foundation and have claimed on their forms, which are available to the public, that the Clinton Foundation was something that it isn't. They claimed that it was a public charity when it is not a validly organized and operated charity. They claimed that it was authorized for the purposes that the Clinton Foundation took the money, and that's not the case. If we, just to give you a sense of the rules, if you hit this link, and I've only taken, because I didn't want this to turn into a master class in IRS regulations, but you can go to the very top of this and get a sense just how long it is, right? I mean, I don't know what happened there.
Is that not the top?
A little bit further down. Yeah, start. So this just goes, it goes on and on and on. Here's a taxable expenditures of private foundations. This is the checklist here. It goes through all these different points.
It's quite dense.
A lot of stuff here. So it's not like you could say, well, there are no rules. There are a lot of laws, there are a lot of regulations, there are a lot of precedents, and the Clinton Foundation attitude to all that is F that. we're the Clinton F that foundation. We don't care about any of this stuff. But the issue here for these private foundations is that the Clinton Foundation's gross, obnoxious record is something that really needs to concern these private foundations, because Donald Trump has said that he is going to try to drain the swamp. And an easy way to drain the swamp is to now put enormous pressure on the donors, the private foundation donors, to the Clinton Foundation, which is something we're going to start to do again today. If we go back into the slide.
People in the comments are upset about all the hard work wasted on Halloween for UNICEF.
Exactly. So it says here in the rules, to summarize, that private foundations, you got to make sure that the grants are made only to lawfully organized and operated charities. You can't say on Ford Foundation, I'm giving money to Edsel Ford's girlfriend. You can't. I'm not saying they did that, but and specifically, you've got to make sure that you're making grants to organizations, and you exercise adequate control and supervision over the use thereof. And you got to make sure that you don't provide grants for non-charitable purposes. Those are called, you want to guard against what are called diversions. That's where, Jason, you come to me, or I come to you and I say, I want $1 million to build something in Little Rock, and you give me $1 million. Say, Charles, thanks for all your hard work on this stuff. Here's $1 million. I don't need it. Build that thing in Little Rock. And I come back a year later, I disappear, and I say, I just got back from Kenya. And you say, well, what were you doing in Kenya? I took your money to fight HIV/AIDS in Kenya. And you don't just sit there and say, that's nice. You say, give me my freaking money back. I got a serious problem. You're not allowed to do that. That's a diversion. It's theft.
Charles, I've learned from a channel called YouTuber Law that apparently Google is possibly engaging in diversion. If they decide they don't like somebody's comment on Super Chat, like people who might be watching on Crowdsource the Truth 2, could utilize Super Chat. If they make some kind of hate speech comment, YouTube reserves the right to not give you the money and send it to a charity.
That doesn't seem right.
I agree, but they do it. So we got a lot of weird things controlling the stuff.
So we've been through, this is a 130-second video, we've talked ad nauseum about the many different ways in which the Clinton Foundation has operated and its affiliates illegally, unlawfully, around the world. And these big donors, the Gates Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, they don't have the excuse of saying, we're too busy. We can't check this stuff. We're like the government. All our people are watching porn. We can't look at these grant proposals. We can't look at these, we can't notice the fact that the Clinton Foundation has never been audited. We don't do that kind of stuff. No, the laws are written and the regulations are enforced that a private foundation has to make sure before it makes a grant, it has to do due diligence. It has to check and make sure that the organization is, in fact, an organization, which I would argue the Clinton Foundation is not. And then you have to make sure that before you gave the entity money, you had a diligence thing. That as you gave them money, you continue doing diligence. After you give them money, you have an after-action report. There are all these reports that should exist, that a real investigative team, not led by Rod Rosenstein, not led by James Comey, not supervised by Robert Mueller, because they obviously don't know what they're doing. They're interested in witch hunts and persecutions. A real investigative group will look and say, all right, let's tick off Unitate. What did they tell Unitate and when? Where are the emails back and forth? Who was copied on them? And here's Hillary Clinton copied on an email, when she was Secretary of State that she didn't turn over. And here's the Gates Foundation email, and here's this foundation email. Here are all these emails that you finally get when you turn the heat up, that Hillary Clinton tried to bleach bit. And the way you're going to get them is that the Gates Foundation is not going to have destroyed their emails. They would not want to do that.
Charles, I can't help but think, after listening to all the evidence that you've presented, it almost seems like all of these people, Rockefellers, Gates, whatever, Bushes, they were waiting for somebody to show up and be like, I'll run the giant criminal slush fund. And they were like, all right, Bill, you're the guy, right?
You're in.
Doesn't it seem like they need somebody who's willing to, it's not just willing, someone who's got the political fortitude, the general charisma, and the following to be able to do this and have it get over. It's unbelievable.
Right. Well, and wait, it gets worse.
Yeah.
And so, it's obvious to me, I am not a private investigator, or I should say a licensed private investigator. I'm just somebody who has time on his hands and is encouraged and others to get this goddamn criminal syndicate fully exposed, investigated, prosecuted, incarcerated, and punished with no leniency whatsoever. And from the information that we've shared with you already in the public domain, it's obvious that you should not be giving money to, as a private foundation or as anybody, to the Clinton Foundation. If you go to the next page, some more laws, it basically says that, you're making a taxable expenditure. It's a really big problem. If, as a private foundation, you give money to an entity that's basically not allowed to, that's operating outside charitable purposes, which is the only thing the Clinton Foundation is doing. Everything that they do is outside their charitable purpose. They finished the research center and archive November 18th, 2004. They've had some minor improvements to it. That's their only authorized purpose. Everything else is not an authorized purpose. So ever since November 18th, 2004, arguably before that, they were engaged in non-charitable prohibited expenditures. You can't do that. And you really can't, you got to make sure as a private foundation that you're not making what are called wrongful distributions, excessive compensation, like letting Bill Clinton have 17.6 million beyond, from a joint venture partner of an illegally set up, in theory, university system, which is ridiculous. Or how about his penthouse apartment with the rooftop pleasure garden that he inhabits rent-free, and the catering service and the banquet hall?
Do they stay there rent-free?
It's free, yeah.
Why are they allowed to do that?
They're not allowed to. You shouldn't be allowed to do that, but that's nonetheless what they do. I mean, you're supposed to, when you do something like this, you're supposed to have such an apartment available for the use of the staff, outside visitors. It can't be dedicated to one person or one family. If you're doing that, you're basically giving an illegal gratuity to the Clintons.
Right, because they're tax exempt, which we pay for, and he gets an apartment. I mean, as the former president, doesn't he, I imagine, you got to get some kind of pension or some kind of lifelong payment of just...
Yeah, but you don't get a...
Not all this other stuff.
You don't get a penthouse,
What is the deal for the president? Once you leave,
you get
$400,000 a year for the rest of your life?
You get whatever. It depends on who the president is. I mean, I think you get your salary for life, and then you also get payments from the General Administration Office for one office. You get Secret Service protection for life. But, that's like $1 million a year all in, something like that. Thereabouts.
That's a lot of money, really, for most people to live on. $1 million a year, you
don't live on that million. That's
right, because everybody's taking you out to dinner anyway. You're the president.
No. The $1 million is just for the cost of the Secret Service agents and your office at Harlem and whatever. The point is, you're not supposed to commingle that with the foundation and for personal business and whatever, which is the essence of what the Clintons do.
Yeah,
Clinton cash, man.
They love it.
And if you had a real accounting firm, go on the inside look bank account by bank account, company by company, around the world to the beginning of time, and look at this. Look at every legal bill, and if you have the FBI with their fearsome power, you can't lie to an FBI agent, go after all these people, you go after the law firms and you say, listen, you were enabling, fostering a criminal enterprise, you go after BKD, and the other accounting firms that do not have any privilege right. So they can't say, I can't show you this information. No, they have to show all their books and records to the FBI. You would have this thing sorted out in maximum a month. It probably could be sorted out in, less than a month.
Well, I hope they get to it, because we are waiting for that swamp to drain.
Yeah. So if we go to the next page.
David Hawkins determined today that the clog in the drain is Wilbur Ross.
Yeah, okay. So people like details, and so this is a list of 12 private foundations that are identified as having given money to the Clinton Foundation. And it's interesting to know that we're going to go entity by entity through them. So Mike Bloomberg and his various philanthropic activities, there are several ties. First of all, Maura Paley, who was the acting CEO of the Clinton Foundation after Braverman resigned briefly, I think is still involved with the Clinton Foundation, had previously worked at the Bloomberg Foundation. So she should know how the Bloomberg Foundation works, and she definitely knows how the Clinton Foundation doesn't work. And Mike has been enormously generous, both through his foundations and personally, and quietly. He's really an amazing philanthropist. But when we look at the actual technical economics, he gives out $435 million through this one foundation. Now, there are several Bloomberg foundations, and we're not yet sure which of them were the actual donors. We picked the biggest one. Biggest one has $8.9 billion in net assets at the end of December 31st, 2017. So what does that mean? It means that the grants that went out in 2017 were less than 5% of the total assets. Put that slightly differently, with no return on those assets, it would take you 20.5 years to disperse all the assets that have already been built up. And so that's all well and good if a foundation is operated lawfully for a charitable purpose. It's carefully and tightly run. But if it's not so run, and Mike Bloomberg is rumored to be thinking about seeking the Democratic nomination for president or maybe running as an independent against Trump, so he definitely has political ambitions. He was the mayor of New York for, 3 or 4 terms.
Yeah.
And here he's got this gigantic business involved in news, which is, parts of it are superb, actually.
How did you like Bloomberg as mayor of New York, Charles?
New York was very prosperous when he was mayor, so part of that is probably make it seem that he was doing a good job. I didn't like his overreach on big sodas and stuff like that. But
cutting down on the entertainment value at McDonald's.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but that was a direct attack against me. No, I'm just kidding. But here's somebody whose team definitely understands a good charity from a bad charity. Query: why is Mike Bloomberg allowing the various Bloomberg philanthropies to support the "It's Not Easy Being Green" scam of C40, which Bloomberg was the chairman of for a period of years? Why is he doing that? Is he trying to cover it up? Much like what happened with Trump. If Trump has a problem with his foundation, Bloomberg has a massive problem with his foundation over contributions through his foundation to the crooked Clinton charities. And he's got to stand up and fess up about them. The Clinton Family Foundation is separate and apart from the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. That is today relatively small. It only gave out $1.1 million in grants. Its ending net assets were $2.5 million. So 43% of its assets, 44% were doled out in 2017. But is that Clinton Family Foundation just a tax avoidance advice or tax shifting advice that you make a donation to it? In the early years, I believe, in a quick review of those foundation filings, that they illegally claimed they were a public charity when they were not. They were a private foundation, and therefore the Clinton family got a higher tax deduction than they should have taken. And of course, the Clinton Family Foundation has sent money to various and sundry illegally organized and operated Clinton Foundation operations. So, that's a massive mess. The Ford Foundation is another big one, older than the Bloomberg Foundation, of course, but they're in a similar position. 4.5% of their assets given away, $500 million. They would take 22 years to wind this thing down if you had no income on the assets and you just gave away $535 million a year. That's a lot of money to give away. And as we'll show you, we have some pressing needs in this country. And if you're not going to manage these foundations in accordance with law, maybe the thing you should do, because it's a large pile of money and we happen to need it to pay down our debt, maybe these foundations that are not going to respect the law and that like the Gates Foundation, that egregiously, in my opinion, violate applicable laws, maybe they don't get the right to any leniency, and maybe the other ones that are now hearing about this for the first time will look at this and say, why haven't we filed a tax return after 2016 in New York? Because we're based in New York, and you're supposed to file them. Concerning 2017, that return should have been filed by November 15th, 2018, and it's not on file. So what's up with that, Ford Foundation?
Well, Lisa Marie brings up a good point about the tainted blood scandal when Bill Clinton was president. Some of that blood, most of it went to Canada, I think, but some went to Africa. So they're sort of like causing HIV and then saying, oh, we'll create a charity to cure HIV. Yeah. What, if any, connection exists between the Ford family and the Bush family? I know Ford was sending trucks to the Nazis during World War II, and of course, Prescott Bush was famously laundering money and doing all kinds of Nazi financial stuff. I wonder if the Fords and the Bushes have any kind of link.
I don't know. I don't know the answer. But you know, the Ford Foundation has been around for a long, long time, and I would argue it and the Bloomberg Foundation, the Gates Foundation, are basically, in quotes, paragons of this unregulated globalism movement. That, you know, instead of giving money and paying taxes, and they pay a lot of taxes, but instead of paying as much as they might, you know, let's set up these organizations to embrace unregulated globalism. And, you know, with $11.8 billion in your bank account or in various securities, that you can employ a lot of people, and it doesn't take much to change opinions of influential politicians when you have that kind of a budget going around, both for grants and for hiring people. Sidney Frank is somebody I've met. He is somebody who, what was that? It's Sky Vodka, I think he created. He's
Really?
a liquor. He was married to a liquor heiress. I sold a liquor company for a client at Dillon Reed in 1986-7 time frame, and he wanted to buy it. And I had to explain to him that he didn't have enough money to buy it. He didn't like that very much because I was 30 years old and he was this big, he was now I think in his 80s.
Wow.
But he created Jägermeister,
Oh my God.
and he got in trouble with that. He got in trouble sort of chasing the Jägermeisterettes around, and then his wife was going to divorce him, but she died.
What he got in trouble? You mean he was like having sexual scandals with?
Yeah, but then he got lucky. He created this Sky Vodka, I think it was, and that sold for $2 billion.
Oh, wow.
And then he's been a generous philanthropist, but he gave money to the Clinton, I think, Global Initiative operations that didn't exist. He gives $33.8 million away.
33.
Yeah, $286.6 million of ending net assets again in 2016. You know, what the hell? Where's your form for 2017? Gilman is another foundation. They give away $12.9 million in 2016. They have $319 million in assets, 20 in assets. Very big enterprise, but multiple grants to the Clinton Foundation for operations that were not lawfully organized. Same thing for the Haas Foundation, a smaller foundation. Then you get to Elton John, his foundation, which should be ashamed of itself. First of all, it's not a private foundation, it's a public charity. And how Elton John could let his, you know, mega name be used for concerts and fundraising to support a charity that's, I believe, did distribute adulterated HIV/AIDS drugs when you're gay. You know, I mean, it's just, I don't understand that kind of behavior.
But out of all of these people, I mean, Elton John is best known for being a musical genius, not necessarily a financial genius. And I think you could more easily envision like a rock star being taken advantage of by financial people than like Bill Gates.
But the power of celebrities to raise money for charities is immense. And the power of fraudsters to get behind these concerts and these events and then scoop the money out and slide it over to Bill Clinton and his people or other people like that is an area of the law that needs to be brought into the 21st century.
Yeah.
And, you know, all these celebrities who are the first to virtue signal and, you know, tell lessons to all of us about how we should live our lives, not, you know, in the way they think is right. And I'm not saying Elton John is a bad person, but he needs to recognize at this stage of his life his power. And he needs to stand up and be counted and say, you know, I was hoodwinked by the Clintons.
Hoodwinked is possible.
And I'm really furious about it, and I'm not going to let you get away with this.
Yeah.
You know?
I would just say that of the celebrities that I've met, being smart is not necessarily like you know, you know someone from movies or music or whatever, and you have this huge opinion. Then you meet them, and it's like they're just some dumb guy who, you know.
But he is a musical genius.
He is a musical genius, and I'm not saying he's dumb, but I'm saying that is a possibility. He didn't become a musical genius by being a financial expert.
Right. But so then on this MAC AIDS is another AIDS charity. Again, they should be ashamed of themselves. They gave money to the Clinton Foundation in certain years when there definitely was not a lawfully organized HIV/AIDS operation, and they gave, you know, a substantial sum. MAC is the former CEO of Morgan Stanley. It's a personal small foundation. Pete Peterson was Commerce Secretary decades ago. Then he was the co-founder of Blackstone. He is dead.
Blackstone, that's a venture capital firm that's doing all kinds of bad stuff, isn't it?
No. I would argue it's doing all. I've met those guys. I met them when they first started. Actually, I was almost like a scene of the producers. I was looking at a deal with them when our firm was very big compared to them, and they wanted to do this deal, and I went over there, and all these people running around like the scene, that early scene of the producers, where's the fax machine? We don't have one. That kind of. It was temporary offices. It was pretty amusing. But Peterson was a very smart guy, and look what he's doing. It would take 59, almost 60 years to give away his money at the pace that they're giving it away in grants. Now they also do some work themselves, and they do important work actually. So I would hope that once they focus on this, and we are going to make it imperative for every name on this list to focus on the malfeasance of the Clinton Foundation and their contributing role in it and their potential tax exposure, and we're going to make sure their accounting firms know about this so that they can, and we would encourage people in the crowd to follow our lead in this. Julian Robertson is the famous hedge fund guy. He was a multi-billionaire, and he's given money, or his people have given money to this crooked thing. And the Rockefellers, of course, have given money through, I believe it's the main Rockefeller Foundation. When you add all this up, these organizations here gave away, and it's not the same time period because some years are 16 and some are 17 and some are 16 and 17, but just add it up for order of magnitude, $1.3 billion they gave away per year, and they ended up with net assets of $26.7 billion. It's a lot of money.
A lot of cake.
A lot of cake. And if you're not going to manage that cake properly, the IRS, under Donald Trump and frankly under Obama and under, God forbid, President Elizabeth Warren, would have the ability to, the way I read the rules, for the egregious violators of the law, the Gates Foundation, they would have the ability to go to the Gates Foundation and say, listen, you can't explain this. We're going to revoke your authority to operate. Just the same way we revoked, and for a different set of reasons, we revoked the Church of Scientology in California. That means, thank you for your assets. We'll take those and we'll pay down debt.
They should do the same thing with Windows 10. They just revoke their authority to be involved with that at all.
But if you go to the next page, why do I feel so strongly about this? This is the level of just our government debt in the United States of America. Okay, these figures are in millions. All right, so wow. It goes from, in federal, $2.4 trillion of debt to 7.4 at the end of Bush's tenure. At the end of Obama's tenure, it's $16 trillion. So it goes up roughly $9 trillion.
Wow.
Okay, at the third quarter of 2018, it's now $17.4 trillion.
So how's Trump doing compared to Obama?
Well, a slower rate of increase, but still he's increasing. And the state and locals actually plateaued at around $3 trillion, stayed right around $3 trillion. So total government debt went from $10.4 trillion to $20.5 trillion by the third quarter of 2018. Jeez. Now, and I've indexed that, I've used 2008 as 100 to show the percentage increase in debt from when Bush was. So it went up 16% cumulative, 32%, 43%, 55%, 62%. You see, it's just soaring under Obama, and now continuing to rise under Trump. And we've got to do something about this. Our total economic output is about $20 trillion right now. You cannot have, this type of a debt growing at this rate forever and expect this country to have anything approaching national security. You cannot have national security without having financial security. You can't have personal security without having personal financial security. And this is irresponsible behavior. Shame on the House, shame on the Senate, shame on the Bush administration, shame on the Obama administration, and shame on the Trump administration for not moving swiftly enough to attack the dark heart of the matter, which is the swamp. We have, he's fond of castigating the people in the media, and I agree with him for doing that. But the media formula is, when you want to articulate a position, you get that idiot regional administrator of the EPA out of whatever foundation he's now in, and you say, well, member of the Bush administration is attacking Trump. Or you get some famous professor at Harvard, a place that is not watching its own tax-exempt status close and spending closely enough to write something that supports an anti-Trump position. Or you get the Council on Foreign Relations to do it, or you get an accounting firm to do it, or a bank to do it, or a donor to do it, or whatever. The way you attack this is by going to the heart of the matter and saying, you know what? All of you people who've been skirting the rules in charity land for decades, you've filed returns, which I would argue in a technical sense are admissions against interest, your returns are evidence, prima facie evidence of charity fraud. You have committed charity fraud, okay? And we are now going to go after you for that. And we're either going to, on the private foundation side, you can levy punitive excise taxes. The amount of the fraud, 100% tax on that, okay, that the foundation has to pay.
Excise tax is just a punitive tax?
It's a special type of tax. It's not an income tax. It's like, it's out of the blue. Forget your annual income tax. Here's a special bonus. You owe me,
smack in the face
here's a
tax.
$150 million bill, and by the way, I'll take that in 24 hours.
Now, Charles, this growing national debt, I remember in my previous apartment building that I lived in like 20 years ago that later got renovated, and then Huma Abedin and Anthony
Oh,
Weiner.
you lived in that building?
Well, it was a crappy rental building when I lived there, and then I moved out. I had sued the building because this is a conversation for later, but I got a bunch of money to leave, and because they were trying to sell the building, which they then did, gutted it, made it a condo building, and then fancy people like Huma and Anthony moved in. But there was an old lady with a ton of groceries one time, and I helped her from the elevator to her apartment with the groceries. And I mean, I knew her from the building, but I didn't know this woman. I went into her apartment, and the apartment was so filled with newspapers. She had stacked to the ceiling, like newspapers from like 1950. I don't even know. More newspaper than I've ever seen anywhere. And my thought was, at what point is the apartment completely filled with newspapers and the old lady can't fit in there anymore? So how can we have these, I mean, to go from 2 to almost 20, at what point does it just burst and there's too many newspapers in the apartment?
We're close. We're close.
Right.
Because, the economic output does not accurately measure how much money, the GDP is the economic output, does not really measure how much money people have available to defray debts of our government, debts of our companies, debts of our students, debts of our banks. To really do that properly, you would have to do it the way an ordinary person does. What's your total income?
Spend less and pay the debt.
Right. What's your total income? What's your tax burden? What's your after-tax income? What's your spending? Cut that. And out of the money that's left, you begin to chip away at your debt. That's not what GDP measures. They double count certain activities as being positive, which are not positive, in fact, in my opinion. And they don't really get into the issue of how much money people put aside each year for savings. And then when they talk about household wealth, they're talking about, the same estimate of household wealth. You got Bill Gates, you got Bloomberg, you got all these mega wealthy people. And then you have the bottom 80% of this country, which is the overwhelming majority of this country, has no financial assets, right? So you have no financial net worth.
Jackass Dad points out that there was a surplus, a government surplus, when Clinton was in office.
For 1 year. And it was puny.
But still, that's better than $20 billion in debt. I mean, if you had a $20 billion credit card bill, $20 trillion credit card bill, your wife or somebody would be like, forget all those F-22s, you're not buying any of that.
Right, exactly.
Pay this bill.
Exactly. These same people, I love the people who, walk into a restaurant, with you, and a bunch of people walk in and say, this is a great restaurant. Well, we've worked hard this week. We all deserve to have some fine wines and, great meal, and order up a big storm, and then,
put it on Mr. Ortel's account.
Exactly. Well, I have a friend, I'm not going to reveal who this is, but I dated somebody whose brother turned down the job of being White House chef.
Huh.
And I heard directly from him, I'm not going to say who this was, that under the Clintons, the Clinton people would go into his fancy restaurant, do just what I talked about doing, and then say,
not pay.
Yeah, so we're not going to pay.
Wait a minute, they would actually get the check?
Yeah, no, they would. Don't give us a bill. We're not going to pay for this.
Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton?
Not Bill and Hillary. People working for Bill and Hillary.
Just figured because they work for the Clintons,
were,
dinner
and
is
the fact
free.
that we've been, and the guy threw him out. He said, hey, don't you ever come, none of you, don't you ever come back to this place.
Why not call the cops?
At
that point, you're not getting no money.
Yeah. But, exactly. But I mean, so there is this entitlement attitude that, these geniuses who are going to say, forget the U.S. government and the state government, it's all bankrupt anyway. We're going to be globalists. Forget this crap.
I think that article about the comedian getting his show bounced shows what's happening with globalism. These guys have taken economic control of our institutions, and now they're, I mean, you know, how soon until Sharia law is here and we all have
That's not happening.
I hope not.
Yeah. So I think, did I send you any This Just Ins? I think I might have sent you
Oh, that's
two.
it for the thing. Okay, so yeah, let's take a look at This Just In. I do believe we have some of those. Wow, Charles, I mean, it's funny. I'm really troubled by that comedian getting shut down because, you know, parody, of course, is one of the last bastions of freedom of speech there. Oh, yeah, well, you had this one about China.
Yeah,
So,
this is what I'm going to talk about a little bit tonight. So, you know, we get all of these funny, and I've noticed, you know, when you get Americans who want to talk about, you know, China is fantastic and China's going to teach us how the world should work, and they always say China in a sing-song voice. China, you know, instead of just China, you know. And I love Chinese food. I know you don't like Chinese food. I've been to China. I've been to Hong Kong many times. China for less than a day, once.
I told you my taxi got crashed into on the highway in China, and I just got out on the highway and another taxi came right up.
He said, "That's it."
No, the taxi driver and the truck driver were fighting about the crash, and I just got another taxi.
Oh boy, I hope they're not listening. They're probably going to come after you for that
They're
bill.
in China.
China. But we've been talking about this for some time now, and you know, when you really, to understand what's going on inside China, you have to look at in some detail at statistics that are available through something called UNCTAD, which is actually a UN agency. And it has great statistics on all the world's economies going back to 1970, year by year, translated to dollars. And that shows starkly, as we said before, that there's a gigantic bubble in China, that they've been building all kinds of buildings that nobody's going to want to live in. And now here's a story that says, you know, this story and others have said that there may be as many as 50 million empty apartments in China.
Well, didn't they build all those cities that are...
Right. So, yeah, here 50 million Chinese apartments are empty. And that's not because the owners are traveling to Paris. It's just because nobody is, you know, so when you just go down a track of, you know, pumping out money and there's no controls and nobody's looking at it and there's all this insider gaming and you kill people who get on the wrong side of government, and you've got a situation...
Pollute the place like crazy.
And you've got a situation in China also where you make the stupid decision that you're not going to grow your population, you're going to shrink it. It's very tough. You know, if you're going to make a case that a national economy makes sense, if the population is shrinking in size, then the demand for goods and services necessarily will be shrinking. And it's tough to make the growth case, you know, the standard Wall Street style growth case that why you should invest in China. The second thing, this I thought you'd really be interested in. Apparently, 18,000 documents concerning the September 11 attacks may have been sourced by somebody who's now trying to hold up, this is according to the FT, the Dark Overlord.
Wow. Looks like the dark overlord watches Crowdsource the Truth, because this is very similar to like the look of a graphic I would create, and I think I've even used this image almost exactly like that. So they're saying a theft of 18,000 documents from where? From the FBI?
I don't know.
And a collective known as the Dark Overlord. See, I know people think it's cool to be anonymous and everything, but I don't know. That's look at what they're saying here. This is how they're communicating with the FBI. I mean,
the FBI is investigating this.
Yeah, the FBI are a bunch of jerks, and I don't think they're really able to do too much because they don't seem to investigate anything other than what Robert Mueller tells them.
I think the line people in the FBI are not jerks, but the management clearly are jerks.
They covered up 9/11.
Interesting, if you look here at the top, it says, very top, it says, the hackers claimed on New Year's Eve that they had taken emails and non-disclosure agreements relating to the 9/11 attacks.
Oh,
that's interesting.
That is interesting because in Michael Moore's book, How We Dismantled the FBI in Our Pajamas, he talks about a lot of people who were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements and to lie to the 9/11 Commission.
That's not good.
Yeah. So all these wonderful line people who are in the FBI, I don't mean to upset you if I just said you're a jerk, but if you know about this and you're not doing anything, you're protecting yourself and trying to avoid the type of persecution that Dr. Corsi has experienced, that so many of the other people we hear from have experienced, but you're doing it at the sacrifice of everybody in the United States of America, because if whoever is running the FBI is forcing this to happen, we need those line people in there to do something and
Right.
not just sit there and let this stuff pass. They've got to speak out and they've got to stop it. So I think that's all we had for this just in stuff. So they hacked insurance companies involved with the 9/11 settlements for Silverstein. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I thought you'd find that interesting.
Hacker group stolen from a law firm. Huh.
So that's all I have for you today, Jason. I know you like to remind people of how to support.
Sorry, I was just looking at the comments there. Yes, I do want to encourage people to stay with us on Patreon. I know it's problematic, but the announcements made earlier by Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson, I think that was yesterday they were making those announcements. They underscore some of the really vexing problems with coming up with an alternative to Patreon. It's not simply a matter of creating a web page that can manage subscriptions and allow creators like me to deliver exclusive content in the way that Patreon does. It's the issue of, if you want to be paid electronically on the planet Earth in 2019, you're basically dealing with Visa, MasterCard, which is one company, or American Express, which I think is much smaller, or that's it. So there's not too much choice there, and it doesn't seem like Jordan Peterson and David Rubin have a very good solution as yet. So I hope that people will stay with us on patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. We still have a lot of exclusive content going out on there. Some of my Patreon-only guests took the first days of New Year off, but tomorrow we will be back with the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp. Getting a little tongue-tied there, Charles. Speaking extemporaneously all day sometimes causes that to happen. But people who object to Patreon, I understand where you're coming from. I hope you will still support the show by going to paypal.me/crowdsource the truth. You're still giving money to Visa and MasterCard. If you do that, I don't know what to do, because you got cryptocurrency. We don't know who created that. We really are all slaves to money, and we're now seeing the people controlling the money. It's like we're getting to the end of the line, when they could control the information by controlling the news stations and the New York Times and whatever, they did that. But now, as information starts to come out from various sources like this show and other shows we're doing on Crowdsource the Truth, we see the power they have to clamp down. So it's really important that people stay with us. The way Patreon is acting is a contrast to what I believe I saw from Jack Conte when I met him personally. He did seem like a sincere guy who was interested in doing the right thing. And I wonder if David Hawkins' presumption isn't correct, that they're being forced to do this. And it has to hurt them. When I look at tweets that Patreon is putting out about anything, I mean, every response is super hating on Patreon. So we'll see what happens, Charles, but I'll see you on Sunday, where, that will be the next time we convene, and very anxious to see what happens with Dr. Corsi's case tomorrow, as he and Larry Klayman bring the first substantial case against Robert Mueller's special counsel office. We will see what happens.
Good luck with that. Send him my best.
Absolutely, and thanks everybody for watching. See you tomorrow.